That thing isn't getting on this plane. Company policy, the words, clipped and cold, hung in the stale airport air. A death sentence delivered without mercy. They were directed at Sergeant Rex, a magnificent German shepherd whose loyalty was as unwavering as the veteran who leaned heavily on his cane beside him. The veteran, Arthur Sterling, his frame brittle with age and the invisible scars of war, felt the familiar prick of indignity, the slow burn of injustice. He'd faced down rockets and machine gun fire, navigated minefields and the crushing weight of loss, only to be stopped dead in his tracks by a young man in an airline uniform whose badge seemed to confer absolute authority. This wasn't just about a flight. It was about dignity, about a bond forged in the crucible of trauma, about service dismissed and sacrifice ignored. What Arthur did next, a quiet act born of desperation and long-buried pride, would shatter the bureaucratic indifference and force a reckoning. Stay with us to see the moment everything changed. If you believe in honoring those who served, and that true heroes don't always wear capes or demand recognition, type respect in the comments below. Arthur Sterling looked every bit the forgotten soldier. His worn canvas cap, though lacking insignia, sat low on his brow. His clothes were practical, clean, but dated, a simple plaid shirt, sensible trousers. A tremor ran through his left leg, a constant reminder of the jungle ambush that had nearly claimed his life 50 years ago. He moved slowly, deliberately, his weight primarily on the cane and the solid presence of Sergeant Rex, who sat patiently by his side, a picture of calm professionalism in his clearly marked service dog vest. The vest wasn't fancy. It was practical, proclaiming "Service Dog, Do Not Disturb" in bold letters, along with patches from a reputable service animal organization and, less visibly, a small, faded patch with the insignia of the 101st Airborne Division. They were at the check-in counter for their flight to Washington, D.C., a trip Arthur made annually for a quiet, private commemoration at the wall. It was never easy, the travel, the memories, but Rex made it possible. Rex wasn't just a dog. He was Arthur's anchor, his early warning system, his mobility aid, his therapist, his constant, loving shadow against the encroaching darkness of PTSD and the physical limitations that defined his later years. The airline agent, a man named Thompson whose name tag gleamed brighter than his smile, hadn't even made eye contact initially. His gaze had been fixed on his computer screen. When Arthur finally spoke, requesting pre-boarding due to his disability and service animal, Thompson's eyes flicked up, narrowed, and landed squarely on Rex. That's when the air turned frigid. "A dog? Sir, dogs have to be crated and checked as cargo. It's airline policy." Arthur's grip tightened on his cane. His voice, usually soft, held a quiet firmness. "He's not a pet. He's a trained service animal. He's required for my medical needs. The Air Carrier Access Act dash." Thompson cut him off with a dismissive wave. Yeah, the emotional support animal loophole. We don't recognize those anymore without specific, extensive documentation and doctor notes, and even then, size restrictions apply. And this is a large dog. He's cargo or he doesn't fly." He gestured towards the floor, a flicker of amusement in his eyes that ignited a cold knot in Arthur's stomach. "Unless you can fit him in a carrier under your seat." Arthur's jaw tightened. Rex, sensing his handler's distress, nudged Arthur's hand gently with his nose. Arthur patted the dog's head reassuringly. "He is not an emotional support animal," Arthur stated, his voice low and steady despite the tremor starting in his hands. "He is a fully trained service dog, for mobility and medical alert. He has his certification. He accompanies me because I am a disabled veteran and require his assistance." He fumbled in his worn satchel and produced a thick folder. Thompson barely glanced at it. He picked up a form from his desk, tapping it. "Look, policy is policy. Animals need to be crated. Is this dog crate trained?" "He is trained to assist me 24 hours a day," Arthur replied, his patience wearing thin but not yet broken. "He needs to be with me." "Well, he can't be," Thompson said, his tone final. "Cargo or no flight. Next." He pointedly looked past Arthur to the next person in line, who shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. The indignity of being waved aside, replaced by the mundane rush of civilian travel, was a bitter pill. Arthur stepped out of line, his heart sinking. He wasn't looking for special treatment, just the accommodation he was legally entitled to, the accommodation that allowed him even this limited freedom. Rex sat faithfully by him, his brown eyes tracking Arthur's face with quiet concern. Arthur knew arguing further with Thompson was futile. He needed to escalate. He found a quiet corner away from the main throng and called the airline's customer service line. 30 minutes on hold, navigating automated menus, explaining the situation repeatedly to different representatives who quoted the same rigid policies, and finally, being transferred to a supervisor who offered a condescending apology but no solution. Our agents are simply following protocol, sir. Unless you have the updated, specific documentation we now require for all animals in the cabin, regardless of their designation, we cannot permit the animal to board with you. The supervisor suggested Arthur reschedule his flight and find a way to transport his dog as cargo, or worse, leave him behind. The thought was unbearable. Rex was family. By now, the boarding time for his flight was approaching. Desperation gnawed at him. He approached the gate agent, hoping against hope for a different outcome. This agent, a young woman named Brenda, seemed slightly more sympathetic but equally bound by rules. She made a call to her supervisor, who then called a manager. The manager, a stern-faced woman named Miss Perkins, arrived radiating authority and impatience. Miss Perkins listened to Brenda for a moment, then turned her sharp gaze on Arthur and Rex. "Is this the issue? Sir, we've already explained the policy at check-in. Your dog cannot fly in the cabin without meeting specific, new requirements. Unless you can produce the exact forms, signed and dated within the last 48 hours by a certified animal behaviorist and a medical doctor specifying the exact task the animal performs that cannot be mitigated by other means, and a recent vaccination record verified by our approved veterinary list, he will have to travel as cargo." And frankly, she looked Rex up and down dismissively. "He looks too large for any approved cargo carrier we have available on this route anyway." Arthur felt his control slipping. His hands were shaking openly now. "Miss Perkins, please. This is Sergeant Rex. He is a trained service dog. He helps me stand, he retrieves things I drop because I cannot bend. He alerts me to physical episodes related to my injury that could be life-threatening if I'm alone. He is not a pet, he is medical equipment just like my cane. My documentation is here." He again offered the folder. "It's from the organization that trained him, approved by the VA." Ms. Perkins didn't take the folder. She folded her arms. "Sir, with all due respect, we see a lot of people trying to bring pets on board now by claiming they are service animals. The rules have changed because of abuse. Unless you have the new required paperwork, we cannot make an exception. The rules are very clear. Is there something about cargo you don't understand?" Her tone was condescending, laced with an impatience that felt like a physical blow. The word cargo, to refer to Rex, who had pulled Arthur from the path of an oncoming car after a dizzy spell, who slept across his legs every night to ease the phantom pains, who nudged him gently awake from nightmares, to call him cargo was beyond insulting. It was dehumanizing not just to Rex but to Arthur himself, reducing their bond, his needs, his service to a mere logistical problem. A small crowd had gathered, drawn by the escalating tension. Some watched with mild curiosity, others with veiled annoyance at the delay. A few looked sympathetic, but no one intervened. Arthur felt utterly alone, exposed, and helpless. He looked at Rex, whose ears were now slightly lowered, his tail still, sensing the conflict and Arthur's rising distress. Officer Miller, an airport security guard, had drifted over, leaning against a stanchion, observing with a smirk. He was young, probably early 20s, sharp uniform, radiating an aura of minor authority coupled with boredom. He seemed to find the veteran's predicament amusing. "Trouble with the mutt, old-timer?" he drawled, not bothering to hide his disdain. Arthur ignored Miller, focusing on Miss Perkins. "My injury is from Vietnam. He's a service dog because I served. I earned this, he gestured vaguely at his injured leg. It was a rare admission. Arthur seldom spoke of his service, let alone used it to justify anything. But the injustice was too much. Ms. Perkins sighed dramatically. Sir, your personal history, while I'm sure it's noteworthy, is not relevant to airline policy. We need the correct forms for the animal. Period. Officer Miller sauntered closer. Yeah, Grandpa, rules are rules. Doesn't matter if you fought the commies or milked cows. The dog needs a cage. He chuckled. A harsh, grating sound. Or maybe you can claim you're the service animal and he's your handler. That did it. 50 years of suppressed trauma, years of swallowing indignation, years of living quietly with sacrifice went rigid. Arthur straightened his shoulders, pulling himself up as tall as his damaged body allowed. His eyes, usually soft and tired, hardened with a dangerous glint. Officer, Arthur said, his voice now dangerously quiet. That dog has more honor in his paw than you'll ever have in your entire body. Miller's smirk vanished, replaced by annoyance. Hey, watch your mouth, Pops. I'm a federal officer, and I was serving my country before you were born, son. Arthur retorted, the heat of long-dormant anger finally surfacing. Miss Perkins stepped between them, flustered. Okay, that's enough. Sir, if you continue to be disruptive, I'll have airport security remove you. She looked pointedly at Miller, who now seemed more interested, a predatory gleam in his eye. Arthur knew he was cornered. He couldn't force them to follow the law. He couldn't fight them physically. The flight was leaving. Defeated, humiliated, he felt a wave of despair wash over him. He looked down at Rex, who was now looking up at him, a quiet question in his intelligent eyes. Arthur knelt, wincing as his bad knee protested, and buried his face in Rex's thick fur for a moment. He felt the dog's solid presence, the quiet comfort he provided. He stood up slowly, ignoring the pain. He looked at Ms. Perkins, at Officer Miller, at the indifferent faces in the crowd. Fine, he said, his voice heavy with resignation. You want your forms? You want proof? You want to understand why this dog is necessary? He reached a trembling hand under his shirt and pulled out a thin, tarnished silver chain. Attached to it were 2 dog tags. Not Rex's, his own. They clinked softly as he held them up. One had his name, service number, blood type. The other, slightly thicker, was different. It wasn't military issue. It was a custom tag, older, more worn than the others he sometimes wore, etched with a simple phrase and a date. He never showed this one, ever. He looked directly at Ms. Perkins and Officer Miller. You want to know why Sergeant Rex is indispensable? You want to know what happened to me? His voice cracked slightly. Fine. I'll make one call. One call to someone who does understand the price of service. Someone who was there. He fumbled in his satchel again, past the medical folder, past his wallet, to a small, battered flip phone, ancient technology in the sleek, modern terminal. He flipped it open, the plastic creaking slightly. He scrolled through the tiny contact list. There was only one name saved, a name he hadn't called in decades. With trembling fingers, he pressed the call button. He held the phone to his ear, the silence on the other end stretching, amplifying the tension in the air. Ms. Perkins watched, skeptical. Officer Miller smirked again, whispering just loud enough to be heard. Who's he calling? The Tooth Fairy? Then a click. A voice, deep and resonant, answered. Sterling? Arthur? My God, is that you? It's George Hammond. What's wrong? Arthur took a deep breath, gathering his composure. George, he said, his voice low. I need some help. I'm at the airport trying to fly to D.C. with Sergeant Rex. The airline. They won't let him on. They're calling him cargo. They don't believe he's a service dog. They're asking for paperwork. Saying my history isn't relevant, he trailed off, unable to articulate the depth of the humiliation. There was a beat of silence on the other end, a silence that felt heavy with unspoken understanding. Then, General Hammond's voice came back, sharper, colder. Put the manager on. Miss Perkins, is it? Arthur held out the flip phone to Miss Perkins, who looked taken aback. Who is this? General George Hammond. The voice on the phone boomed, clearly audible even without a speakerphone, silencing Officer Miller instantly. Put the manager on. Now. Miss Perkins paled visibly. A general? She took the phone hesitantly. This is Ms. Perkins, airport terminal manager. How can I help you, General? She listened, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief, then to dawning horror. Her face drained of color. Her eyes darted from the phone to Arthur, standing quietly with Rex, to the dog tags dangling from his hand. She stammered a few responses, mostly variations of yes, sir. I understand, sir. And I apologize, sir. The word sir delivered with increasing awe and trepidation. The conversation was short, sharp, and entirely one-sided after General Hammond's initial address. When she hung up, Miss Perkins's hand was shaking. She stared at Arthur as if seeing him for the first time. Her eyes, previously hard and dismissive, were wide with shock and something akin to reverence. Officer Miller had stopped smirking and was now standing rigidly, his eyes fixed on Arthur's face, the dog tags, and the quiet, imposing presence of Sergeant Rex. Miss Perkins cleared her throat, her voice trembling slightly. She turned to Officer Miller and Agent Thompson, who had drifted over from the check-in counter, drawn by the commotion. Agent Thompson, Officer Miller. This is Mr. Arthur Sterling. He is not just a passenger. Mr. Sterling is a highly decorated veteran of the Vietnam War. She swallowed hard, glancing at the dog tags. General Hammond. He just informed me of Mr. Sterling's record. He was a sergeant in the 101st Airborne. He served multiple tours. He was severely wounded during Operation Apache Snow. On Hamburger Hill, a collective gasp rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. Hamburger Hill. The name resonated, a symbol of brutal, costly sacrifice. Miss Perkins continued, her voice gaining a new, somber weight. General Hammond informed me that Sergeant Sterling's actions on May 18, 1969, during the assault on Hill 937. He single-handedly assaulted a fortified enemy bunker that was pinning down his company. He took out the position, saving dozens of lives, including Lieutenant George Hammond's. Before he was critically wounded, her gaze fell to Arthur's cane, his injured leg. He received the Medal of Honor for that action. The air in the terminal seemed to freeze. The Medal of Honor, the nation's highest award for valor. This unassuming, quiet old man, dismissed as a nuisance, called old-timer and grandpa, and told his dog was cargo, was a living legend. Miss Perkins looked at the dog tags again, specifically the one Arthur held separate. General Hammond also mentioned that Mr. Sterling continued to serve after his recovery training specialized units, and that he named his service dog, Sergeant Rex, in honor of his K-9 partner who was killed in action during a later mission. The mission where Mr. Sterling received the Silver Star for actions taken while already significantly disabled. She finally looked at the custom dog tag in Arthur's hand, reading the faint etching aloud. SGT. Rex. Kia July 14, 70. Tears welled in her eyes. Sergeant Rex. This dog. He carries on the legacy of a fallen hero. Officer Miller's face was pale, his jaw slack. Agent Thompson looked like he might faint. The bystanders were silent, many now openly weeping or covering their mouths in shock and shame. They had witnessed the casual disrespect shown to a true American hero. Miss Perkins turned to Arthur, her posture completely changed. No longer arrogant or dismissive, she stood straighter, but with humility. Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Sergeant Sterling. I don't know what to say. There are no words sufficient to apologize for the way you have been treated today. For the disrespect, the ignorance, the complete failure to recognize. She choked up, unable to finish the sentence. Officer Miller, prompted by a sharp, silent glare from Miss Perkins, visibly swallowed his pride. He stepped forward, his youthful arrogance utterly crushed. He fumbled with his cap, removing it, Sergeant Sterling, he mumbled, his voice barely audible. I am so incredibly sorry. I had no idea. What I said, it was out of line, way out of line. Please accept my deepest apology. He looked genuinely contrite, shamefaced. Agent Thompson also stumbled forward, hands clasped nervously. Me too, Sergeant Sterling. I was just following policy, but I should have listened.
I'm truly sorry.
Arthur looked at them, his gaze steady. The anger had subsided, replaced by a profound weariness and a touch of sadness for the lack of understanding. He didn't gloat. He didn't yell. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of their apologies. Ms. Perkins regained her composure slightly. General Hammond has instructed us to ensure you and Sergeant Rex have the most comfortable journey possible. Effective immediately, Sergeant Rex is not only permitted but welcomed in the cabin, with full access and no restrictions based on size or breed. Furthermore, she looked pointedly at Thompson and Miller, her voice firm. A full review of our service animal policy training will be conducted, starting this afternoon. The way you were treated today is unacceptable and will not happen again on my watch. She turned back to Arthur, her expression softening. Sergeant Sterling, your flight is boarding now. Please allow us to escort you personally. And thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for everything. She gestured for a skycap, a man who had also been watching, tears streaming down his face. The skycap rushed over, not to take bags, but to stand ready to assist in any way. Arthur, leaning on his cane, looked down at Rex, who now sat tall, sensing the shift in atmosphere, the respect that filled the space. He gently scratched behind Rex's ears. "Good boy, Rex," he murmured. He then looked at Miss Perkins, Officer Miller, and Agent Thompson. It's okay," Arthur said quietly, his voice softer now. "Just remember this. Not everyone who walks slow or looks tired is weak. Not every service is given with a uniform on. And sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who just need a little help getting on a plane with their best friend." He began to move towards the gate, Miss Perkins walking respectfully by his side, the skycap ready to assist. Officer Miller and Agent Thompson stood rooted to the spot, watching him go, the weight of their misjudgment heavy on their shoulders. The crowd parted for Arthur and Rex, eyes filled with a mix of awe, regret, and respect. Some offered quiet words of thanks. Others simply nodded their heads in solemn acknowledgement. As Arthur reached the gate, he paused and looked back. Miller and Thompson were still watching. He offered them a small, sad smile, a gesture of forgiveness that spoke volumes. Then, turning, he slowly walked down the jet bridge, Sergeant Rex walking proudly beside him, their silhouettes framed against the bright light of the aircraft entrance. On the plane, they were escorted to spacious seats. The flight attendants were informed and treated Arthur and Rex with utmost care and deference. Rex settled down by Arthur's feet, head on his paws, a picture of calm. Arthur leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment, the emotional exhaustion finally hitting him. The journey to the wall would be easier now. He had been seen. He had been heard. His service, his sacrifice, his need, they had finally been recognized. Not because he demanded it, but because a friend, a fellow veteran who understood, had reminded the world who Arthur Sterling truly was. The antagonists were not fired, not publicly shamed beyond the immediate moment, but the impact was profound. For Ms. Perkins, it was a stark lesson in the human cost of rigid adherence to bureaucracy over empathy and understanding. For Miller and Thompson, it was a humbling, unforgettable encounter that shattered their youthful arrogance and forced them to confront the reality of service and sacrifice they had so flippantly dismissed. Stories filtered through airport staff, becoming a legend, the quiet old man with the service dog who brought a general to his feet. Policy changes were indeed implemented, training revised, emphasizing respect and understanding for veterans and disabled passengers, moving away from adversarial interpretation of rules towards helpful accommodation. The sight of service animals moving freely and respectfully through that terminal became more common. A quiet, living memorial to the day a forgotten hero reminded them all what respect truly meant. Arthur Sterling continued his annual trips, never seeking fanfare, just quiet remembrance with his loyal companion by his side, now always welcomed. This story is a powerful reminder that we should never judge a book by its cover. The quietest person in the room might carry the heaviest burdens and have the most incredible stories. Let us remember to treat everyone with respect, for you never know the battles they have fought or the sacrifices they have made. True heroes walk among us, often asking for nothing in return. We owe them our gratitude, our understanding, and our respect. If this story touched you and you believe in honoring our veterans and treating everyone with dignity, please give this video a like and share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more stories that celebrate the strength of the human spirit and the power of respect. Subscribe now and join our community dedicated to lifting up the forgotten heroes among us.